was Rebbe and everything that kind of been separated totally.
How long after he made it to Al-Massad did she come?
Right.
How long since he was arrested? And
How long from his arrest until she was able to join him?
I think she came there a couple months after he got there, so it would be probably 3/4 of a year.
In other words, at the original time when she saw him and asked him if this and that 2 days, he said that was after us 5 months, no?
Oh, I thought you were saying when she joined him in Gullus. When did she see him was a few months.
A few months. When she
I don't
joined
remember,
him.
I would have to look it up, but I think that was she saw him again one more time, the day that he left. He was an even worse matzav then. She says it's very heartbreaking to write how bad she describes that he looked. But this was probably, I'm going to guess 2-3 months.
Who was it that you're going? Who was it that you're going down with refugee? That the Rebbe told him stay Muhammad and you'll teach the Rebbe.
This was new. We discovered him and put his name in the early years book. Now I'm forgetting his name. He was a Litvish Rosh Yeshiva who lived in the Rebbe's house for a year and taught the Rebbe. It'll come to me. I always forget his name, but we discovered him. There's a picture of him and his matzeva and everything in the book, in the early years book. But Mistamid is an early years book within reach, so anybody could take it. I just don't remember the name now, but it'll come to me.
Can you repeat the question when you get one?
Yes. The question was, who was the refugee who moved into the Rebbe's house and taught the Rebbe and his brothers? And the answer is, we located him. He was a Rosh Yeshiva from Lithuania, otherwise known as a Litvish Rosh Yeshiva, who lived in the Rebbe's house for a year and taught the Rebbe and his brothers until he reported to the Rebbe's father that I too have nothing to teach them, after Reb Zalman did that a year earlier, and he moved on out.
So Reb Zalman was first.
Reb Zalman taught the Rebbe from 7 until 11 and a half.
And after what, the Litvish.
And then there was a bit of a break, and then the war broke out and the refugees came. The Rebbe's father went over to this guy in Shul and started speaking to him and saw he was a tremendous goy. So he said, come move into my house. I want my children to be able to learn with you, 24 hours a day, to be able, whenever they want,
And one thing was a story about the evolution.
The Rebbe walked in on him on Tisha B'Av once and caught him learning. See, the Rebbe left a bunch of clues to help us find this person, but he never said his name. But he said he was a Rosh Yeshiva from Lita. I don't know if he said a Rosh Yeshiva Malamed, he said from Lita, who taught us. And then in other place, the Rebbe says that he walked in once on his Malamed, on Tisha B'Av, and they caught him learning. And so they started talking about different things, and one of them was the concept of evolution. And we explained to him that there are people who say, that the world, that people, first there was a tadpole, and then it became a monkey, and then it became and the Rebbe started going into all the reasons how silly it is. So he said, as Malamed told him, the Rebbe by name, don't argue with them. If they want to, you're going to trace your yichus back to Adam Arishan, to whatever, Yitzhak Kappa of the Eibishter, I think, and he's going to go. He's trying to find his lineage back to the monkey, something like that.
It's mentioned.
It's on tape, by the way. This
mentioned that the Rebbe didn't go to the Rebbe's shop, right?
Correct.
So was the is there any writing or anything from Rebbe Leivik on the reason
why?
for it, or why? Or?
There's a lot of speculation, but speculation is only speculation. But L'Poel, the Rebbe never saw the Rebbe Rashab. There are many people who say that it was similar to, the Rebbe explains, I think, the explanation for why the Baal Shem Tov wasn't supposed to, why the Alter Rebbe was not supposed to, he needed to be niskasher to the Magid. Again, this is not, my typical forte is sharing facts. There's a lot of speculation, and the Rebbe's father was not the type of person who sat around and talked to people. He was, I'm just saying, so it's not, even Rabbi Tzachana says, she believes this came from the Rebbe, like, about the Nagelwasser. He was I don't know, to my understanding, again, I'm not, but he was mamish malach. I'm saying a ruchnistic person, and anyway, there's no one's ever, that to my knowledge, ever heard the reason, but it's a fact that he was the Rebbe writes that he was the greatest chassid of the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe was 18 years old by the stalkus of the Rebbe Rashab. He never went to see him. It's obvious that there was something there. By the way, the Rebbe Elkanah writes about the whole shiva, what it was like in their house, how her husband was crying and people came to Menachem Avil, and this shiva for the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe was 18 years old at this time. It's not interesting because the next transfer of the Nesias after that was from the Frierdiker Rebbe to the Rebbe. It's just interesting to place the Rebbe kind of, when the Rebbe Rashab's stalkus, the Rebbe was 18 years old.
And the thing by the bar mitzvah, where the Rebbe Elkanah writes something about that there was an argument during the bar mitzvah.
One of the things, so the bar mitzvah, Rebbe Elkanah writes, was the time where they really felt that, which also, forgive me, but it reminds me of shluchim. It's the personal simchas that often the whole community comes to, v'chulu. It's often a big thing with shluchim. Anyway, she says that that was kind of when they felt, okay, the whole community accepted them, and it was a big, festive thing, whatever. So Shabbos afternoon, she says, I was sitting outside I was sitting in the living room by the women, but it was packed inside. The Rebbe said an Indian in Nigel and an Indian in Chassidus, the bar mitzvah bacher. And then the Rebbe's father wanted him to, it became very, very tense. He wanted the Rebbe to promise something, and the Rebbe didn't want to promise. And he really wanted, and the Rebbe really, and people were crying. She said people were coming out of there with tears streaming down their face. Apparently the Rebbe's father really wanted him to promise something, and the Rebbe wouldn't do it. Until after a long time, I don't remember, she says the amount of time, the Rebbe agreed. And he did it, and then it became a big simcha.
But we don't know what that.
It doesn't say anywhere that it's published. Yeah.
I'm sorry, maybe you already said this, but how long was the Rebbe living with his parents, and why weren't the boys sent to learn with the Lubavitch or the Lubavitch Yeshivas?
Why they were not sent, we don't know. We do know that there were all Iluyim, that the entire city and way beyond the city knew about these three boys, that they learned under their own father's tutelage, who was himself a Goyin Olam. And, he arranged special melamdim for them, and they were, I'm saying they had their own private tutors pretty much. Even the Cheder by Reb Zalman was a few kids. Why he didn't send them to yeshiva? I mean, you have to realize, yeshiva isn't like today. Yeshiva in Lubavitch was founded, I don't know exactly how many years earlier, but the whole concept of a yeshiva like that is, for Chassidish yeshiva, was not, but listen, obviously they weren't destined to see the Rebbe Rashab. The one yeshiva, I believe, was Timchat Mimim in Lubavitch at the time.
So they lived with their parents until, how old was the Rebbe?
Rebbe started going back and forth to Leningrad, I'm going to say about 1924 or 25, so he would have been 22.
Until then, he lived with his parents?
He lived with his parents. The Rebbe got a shtele as a Rav at 18 in one of the shuls in the Ravs. The Rebbe sat and learned. The Rebbe sat and learned his entire life. He sat and learned Torah. I shouldn't say that, I take that back. He stood and learned. Many of the testimonies that we have of the Rebbe learning, he was standing and learning. He was a Russian? Where was he from? I don't know that he was from Russia. Anyway, but yeah. It could be way in the early 20s, it was still possible. The Rebbe left in 28. 28, yeah. 27. It's Tishrei, I always get confused, it was Tishrei Deches.
There's many Chassidim that left in the 20s. But Rivki and others.
So I'm talking more later, things got difficult, like when the Frierdiker Rebbe left. Because again, I'm not such a bucky in the Russisch exodus, at least this part of it. But the Rebbe's father could not get out. That was obvious. They didn't let him go. They wouldn't even let them go to the Chasna.
The name Schneerson was like Gambino, right? It wasn't like.
Yeah, sure. They were absolutely.
Did he want to get out in the early 20s? He didn't want to get out. Did he want to? Yeah.
I think so. Listen, hard to know, but I don't know if the early 20s. Things got worse and worse. Through the 20s, early 30s. It was only a matter of time before he was arrested. They kind of knew this. mean, Rebbe Elkanah says about the Purim, before he was arrested, there was a big fabrengen, but they knew already they were being watched. There were people outside. They weren't even hiding themselves anymore. They were just trying to. I mean, they knew for a while before that he was in their sights.
And were there letters from Leivik to the Rebbe, like already when he was in jail or something?
There's one letter that we know of. I'm trying to remember the year, all the way from Almata. He sends it express, urgent, which got here I think 3 months later or something. It's a letter, yeah.
What was the subject of the letter?
He's asking the Rebbe to send shoes, clothes, tell us about what's going on. We really want to hear. Tell us about your life. You and your brothers, or your brother. When you understand, I mean, what do we understand of the godless of the Rebbe's father? But the situation he was put into, when you just begin in our small understanding to understand what type of person this was, and where he and the place he was put, and the situation he was put into, it's just. I'm saying, like, I can't. And then imagine the Rebbe getting this letter and knowing in real time what kind of he knows what kind of person his father is, and to get such a letter must have been.
I remember reading, I don't remember where, and you can help me. The Rebbe's father, I think he wrote, he was basically crying, what did he want from the why they were doing this to him. You know what I'm talking about?
He writes a letter to, I think the name was Bera, like the prosecutor of the USSR, like a very high, he writes the whole thing, like, what are you doing to me? I didn't do anything. Somewhere in the middle of, or maybe it was toward the beginning, after he was sentenced or whatever, he writes a long letter, leave me alone, let me live out my life with my children, like what? You're taking a person and you made up above him. What?
He wasn't a Jew prosecutor, was he?
I mean, it's not the problem. I'm talking like he was from Stalin's Chaver. I'm talking about like somebody way up there.
What was the efforts that Rebbe made to save Rebbe? Do we know anything about it, or the letters?
We know a little bit about some letters that the Rebbe sent, and I think that there's probably more there than what we know that's out. The Rebbe really trying to. There's letters in Igros Kodesh Chelik Tesvav of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and there's different things Rebbe Elkanah says, and etc. Rebbe Elkanah says, they were constantly sending her stuff, and the Rebbe wrote a letter from Paris, with signed by a notary that he's supporting his father to try and help them get an apartment, like all different things like that.
Sorry, could you go back to that letter that he wrote to the prosecutor? Where is that letter?
In his file. In his file, the KGB file that was given over.
No, but where is it now?
Where is it physically? I don't know if they gave the physical file to the Rebbe's library, but there are certainly copies of it. There was a point at which they wrote a whole summary, kind of, and an apology, but a whole summary of what you see from reading this file, what kind of hero he was, and how they were trying to, the heads of the KGB I think in Ukraine.
Well, this is after
I'm saying
the fall
now
of
in the
communism?
90s.
Is this published somewhere?
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's in Hebrew. We really need to have a good English book written. Many of the Hebrew books are kind of like compilations. They throw in everything and the kitchen sink, which is, we should have that in English too, at the very least. But to write a really good book about it, would take, it needs to be done. And I certainly regret that we don't have any film about him yet. It's just, takes a lot of work, and even to get your arms around the personality like this, to try and put it into something, when you're dealing with, but it needs to be done. It certainly, talks like this come because, for me anyway, because I think that we need to be spending more time and giving more attention. It's the Rebbe's father. And, it's the Rebbe's parents. So, yeah.
Was the Rebbe's brother battle sick his whole life? Or just a certain time?
I think it was about 20 that he became sick. Vachrim in yeshiva in, was it Kharkov? Or Kharkov, I think. Remember him? He had a blonde beard. Came, he was also a goyin. And he was, pilpling with them and learning. At a certain point he visited.
He he was killed by Nazis in the home that he was in?
It's probably, yeah. Probably, yeah.
No, but it was in a mass grave. It's also something that's worth, I mean, obviously you understand it, but the Rebbe had a brother killed by the Nazis, the Rebbe had a sister and a brother-in-law killed by the Nazis. His father was essentially killed by the, when you think about what the Rebbe was through, you know, the Rebbe always managed to project to us simcha, to always be the one to lift everyone up. What?
I believe his grandmother might have also been.
His grandmother, his uncle, his, you know, the Rebbe was, he says it, the Rebbe says it himself in a sikha, it's on video. He says, you know, it's not something to be proud of, because he was saying when people were threatening him about something, Eretz Yisrael, this or that, he says, listen, I left a brother and a sister and an uncle and a baba and this and that, like, it's nothing to be proud of, but don't tell me, like, I'm forgetting the rest of the sentence, but Rebbe says it, so he lists off some of them.
Well, the reading on German this week, the interview that Rebbe said he told someone to visit the father's favor, and he considered like a shlichus. Is there anything like after communism fell that you know that that's Rebbe the ones who travel, or Rebbe say what?
I don't remember who this was to, but somebody, the Rebbe said to somebody something like, you know, we should try and make an effort to bring him here. And then the Rebbe said, Hashena machshava, like, it's not going to happen. The Rebbe Rashab was moved. It was actually, I should have been spoken about this too, it's one of the less known facts. He was the one, the Rebbe's father was the one who gave all the heroes exactly how to move the Rebbe Rashab's body, his caver. He was the Rav and the Makubal, what? I don't know the Rebbe's Hava. I mean, I never heard anything.
But you know, they asked the Rebbe.
I mean, think about it. When did communism fall?
1990.
Yeah. Okay, so it was, you know.
Well, you said, well, we were
saying it was still a chiddush that there was freedom. It took a few years, b'chal, for things to really open up.
Then the Rebbe was more at risk because he was still
you know, the Rebbe hadn't left Brooklyn. But anyway, listen, I'm not here to explain. I don't know. The point, I never heard anything about the Rebbe. But it doesn't mean it didn't happen and that there wasn't conversation about it. I just didn't. The Rebbe was, though, absolutely he asked, there was a Kinnus HaShulchan in Russia then. He asked him to go visit. An Chafav, he said if possible. The Rebbe was very appreciative to anybody who visited.
Why was the Rebbe minute for that? Was of Gimel? And how was it confirmed?
No, this was right when it was fresh. He said the Rebbe got to notice on Chav Ches, so this is a week later. So it says even l'chatchila that we're not sure about the date. This was mamish when, you know, you're getting. He was in Alma-Ata. I don't know, wonder even where the telegram came from. Probably went to Moscow and then some chassidim over there got like. So they were off by a few days then.
The picture that we have of Levi, you know the source, where it's coming from?
Comes from a KGB. It's a mugshot. It's a mugshot. It's a prison photograph. And when the Rebbe gave permission to publish it, he said that it should be known that it was already after he was in prison for a while. In other words, the tzir that people speak about in the Petrovs, that when he would walk down the street, people would stop and stare at him. That he had this. What's in the picture is already after he's in prison for a while.
Do you know earlier pictures?
I believe there's got to be earlier pictures. I believe also that there has to be earlier pictures of the Rebbe, but I've never seen any. I mean, the Rebbe's childhood, I'm saying the Rebbe's wedding, the chulum, but I'm saying going to his father, like the big vidas harabanim that he was part of.
From the newspapers?
Well, I've never seen any other picture.
There are no newspaper photos of the Rebbe's chasna?
Not in any of the articles. I mean, there are many articles, but no photos. I mean, to take a photo then was a big deal. Like, you didn't take a photo of a live news event. You posed for a photo in front of a camera. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know that people took pictures of, but it's got to be something somewhere. Somewhere there's got to be something. I don't know. I think the Eibishter like spreads these things out like breadcrumbs for us to help us get through Gullus. But I'd like to find them now.
Rabbi Elkanah told my father that as du meinst, as mein Sohn sagt, Shene, du hast gedacht, mein Mann.
There you have it. Yeah.
What was the whole story with the clothing? The Rebbe shop, what was it all about? Was there something hiding?
He sent gifts to the Rebbe, to the Rebbe's father. He was bringing up the future Rebbe. So.
What was the clothing?
It was gifts.
Was it
I mean,
like
this is
something
obviously
from,
this is my take. This is not something Yitzchak Tuvov said, but he's bringing up his successor. What do
it
you
can't just be something from a Tzemach Tzedek, it was like a...
No, it was a gift. Listen, I haven't heard. I heard it a long time ago from David Dubov. I hope I got every detail right, but I believe I did. It was gifts.
To the Rebbe.
To the Rebbe's father, to the Rebbe's family. I don't know if we know that much specifically, but and he said he was very close, family-wise. He was his father, the Rebbe's father's father, has a whole. There's a whole sefer of his diaries of the private meals and conversations he would have with the Rebbe Rashab. So there was a very close relation, and the Rebbe, you see, the Rebbe said, added the word personal. Close personal, what did they say? Close relationship, the Rebbe added the word personal. So, he was not only a chassid, he was also, there was a personal connection there.
Is there a story where he didn't, the Rebbe Shab didn't like the way that
Close personal ties, sorry.
The Rebbe Shab didn't like the way that Leibik was teaching one of his Samshekim.
He asked him, where did you get this from? Or he asked him what you
He
saw.
spent like a week or something, or he spent weeks.
One time the Rebbe Rashab asked the Rebbe's father, like he was teaching one of them Sheikhim, maybe some Chavav or something, and he asked him, where are you holding? He said, I'm still on the first page. He was giving it for a long time. He said, what? Wasn't this? He started saying some of the inyanim that he was saying over, that he was finding in the words, that whatever. So he said, I didn't mean all this, but it's all true. Something like that. Is that the way?
Yeah, I guess.
Now, I didn't think all this when I said it, but it's right.
I told him to go weiter. It was a little bit sharp. It wasn't the way that Raghafi told it was a little bit sharp. I think he didn't exactly like it.
These stories, the oral stories, are all subject, I would think, on average you should expect that 50% in error this way or that way, that way or that way. That's why documents and documented stories and first-person recording of stories are so important. Never mind, first-person, people telling their stories in the My Counter Project or whatever also make a lot of mistakes. But at least it's better than third-person or whatever. Anyway.
Thank you.